This screencast is going to look at one-way and two-way chi-square tests. We're going to start with a one-way chi-square test. This is where we have one independent variable and we are looking to see if the observed differences between the groups of the independent variables are different from the frequencies expected on the basis of chance or previous frequency distributions. In this example, we have in the data file the number of men and women who are on the executive board of a national governing body of a sport in the UK. The research question we are trying to examine is whether there is a gender bias in terms of the board membership. So this is a one-way chi-square test because we are interested to examine the frequency of category membership along one variable, so sex. In contrast to the parametric tests covered in other screencasts, this is a non-parametric test. Therefore, the assumptions of normality, homogeneity of variance and covariance, as well as the linearity assumption, are not relevant to the chi-squared test. However, other assumptions need to be met. The first is that each participant is only categorised in one category. So, for example, in ours, you could only be male, you could not also be male and female, so we have satisfied this assumption. This means that this test cannot be used to compare frequency distributions of repeated observations. The second assumption is that the data of frequencies, so counts of people or of our particular variable of interest. So again, we can see that our column for frequencies contains the number of males and the number of females. So we have satisfied this assumption. The final assumption is that category membership is independent, and this means that the number of females is not dependent on the number of males. So it's not that if we already have 4 males, we therefore then have to have 1 female. We need these values to be independent, and in this case they are, so we have again satisfied this assumption. Now that we have met the assumptions of a one-way chi-square, we can run the main analysis. Before we run the main test, we need to weight the cases by frequencies. Normally in SPSS, one cell represents one observation for a particular case. So for example, if we wanted to have 16 males, we would have to have the number 1 as the code for males 16 times in different rows of the SPSS spreadsheet. However, as we're only looking at frequencies in males and females, this is not really practical. So instead, we can have just 2 rows with 16 for males and 4 for females. And we can weight the cases by frequencies, so SPSS understands that this is not one observation for one particular case. To do this, we go to Data and select Weight Cases. Here, we want to select Weight Cases by, and then move Frequencies to the Frequency variable box. Then click OK. Now that we have weighted the cases by the frequency variable, we can run the main analysis. To do this, go to Analyze, select Non-Parametric Tests, then select Legacy Dialogues, and then choose chi-squared. Next, we want to select Sex and move this to the test variable list. Next, click OK. The first box in the output gives us the observed and the expected frequencies for males and females. As you can see, the observed is as was in the data file, so 16 males and 4 females. However, the expected is based on a 50-50 split of the total number of frequencies. So based on this, it was expected that there would be 10 males and 10 females on the board. To find out if the difference between the observed and the expected frequencies is statistically significant, we need to look at the test statistics box. Here we have a chi-square value of 7.2 and the significance value is 0.007. As this value is below 0.05, we can say that the observed frequencies of males and females on the sports governing bodies board is significantly different than what we would expect, based on a 50-50 ratio. We also need to pay attention to the footnote below the test statistics box. It is very important when conducting a chi-square analysis that the minimum number of expected frequencies is no less than 5. If this is the case, a warning message will be displayed under the test statistics box. However, this is not the case in the present example, therefore we can accept the results. However, we could look at this data based on a different gender ratio. For example, we could have data that the gender breakdown of other sport governing bodies is a 3-to-1 ratio, so 75% male and 25% female. We could then look with this particular sport governing body to see whether the gender ratio in this example is significantly different to what we would expect based on this 3-to-1 ratio. To do this, we again go to Analyze and Non-Parametric Tests, and again select Legacy Dialogues and chi-squared. This time, in the expected values, rather than having all categories equal, as we did in the previous example, we want to click on Values. In the box, we want to type the expected values based on our total sample size, which is 20, and the ratio that we want to examine, which is 3-to-1. As males are coded 1 in the datasheet, we're going to enter the expected values based on this ratio for them first. 75% of 20 is 15, so we're going to type this into the values box and then click Add. Next, we're going to type the expected values based on our 3-to-1 ratio for females. 25% of 20 is 5, so we're going to type this into the values box and click Add. Next, click on OK to run the chi-squared based on this 3-to-1 ratio. Again, the first box in the output gives us the observed and the expected values for both males and females. As we can see, the observed is the same as the previous example, however the expected is now 15 for males and 5 for females. If we look at the test statistics, we can see that the chi-square value is 0.267 and the significance value is 0.606. This shows that the gender ratio in the board membership of the sport under investigation is not significantly different from the 75 to 25% gender ratio. Next, we're going to look at a two-way chi-square. This is where we have frequencies of a category membership along two variables. In this data file, we have 3 columns. We have 3 different brands of popular sport clothing, and we're interested in looking at the number of athletes from the US, Russian and Chinese teams who have sponsorship deals with these particular brands. So we have the frequencies of the number of athletes from each country who have sponsorship deals with each brand. The specific research question we are interested in is whether there is a significant difference in the distribution of the 3 brands across the 3 countries. The assumptions of a two-way chi-squared test are the same as a one-way chi-squared test, and the assumptions have been met in this example. Again, before we run the main test, we need to weight the cases by frequencies. So we're going to go to Data, select Weight Cases, click Weight Cases by, and then move Frequencies to the Frequency Variable box. Next, click OK. Now we can run the main chi-squared test. However, we're going to look at a different way in which you can run chi-squared. To do this, you go to Analyze, go to Descriptive Statistics, and select Crosstabs. Here, we want to select our two categories and move one to the rows box and one to the columns box. It does not matter which one we place in which box, as long as there is only one in the rows and one in the columns. Next, tick Display Clustered Bar Charts box. This will produce a bar chart with the total number of athletes sponsored by brand A, B and C, respectively, separately for each country. Next, click Statistics. In the Statistics box, we want to select the chi-squared option to test whether the differences between the observed and expected frequencies are statistically significant. We also want to tick the contingency coefficient and the phi and Kramer's V to produce estimates of effect size. Click Continue and then select Cells. Here we want to tick the expected box under Counts. This will produce a table with the frequencies for each cell that would be expected if the null hypothesis that there are no differences between the brands between the countries was correct. Click Continue and then OK to run the analysis. The first table of interest in the output is the Case Processing Summary. This lists the total number of athletes surveyed from the three countries. The country by brand cross-tabulation table presents a breakdown of frequencies for each brand and country. It also gives the total number of athletes from the three countries who are sponsored by a particular brand, as well as the total number of athletes from each country. This table produces two types of frequencies: those observed in the dataset and those expected if the null hypothesis that there are no differences across the brands between the countries was correct. We can see in the country by brand cross-tabulation that athletes from the USA seem to prefer brand A and brand B to brand C, as their counts for these brands are higher. Athletes from China seem to strongly prefer brand A, as this count is much higher than the count for brand B and C, whereas athletes from Russia seem to prefer brand C, as again this count is higher than the other two brands. To test whether the differences between the observed and expected counts are significant, we need to look at Pearson's chi-squared and its associated significance value in the chi-squared test box. In this example, Pearson's chi-squared is 12.12 and the significance value is 0.016. As the significance value is below 0.05, we can say that the observed differences in the distribution of brand counts across the three countries is unlikely to be due to chance. The symmetric measures box in the output gives the values for Kramer's V and the contingency coefficient, which can be used as measures of effect size. Kramer's V ranges from 0 to 1, whereas the contingency coefficient rarely reaches 1. The squared values of these two coefficients indicate the effect size of the association between brand and country, and so in this example the effect size is fairly small. The bar chart gives us a graphical representation of the observed counts for each brand in each country. To report the results of a chi-squared test, such as this two-way chi-squared, we want to report the Pearson's chi-square statistic, the degrees of freedom. It is also useful to include a table showing the observed and the expected counts. This concludes the screencast for chi-squared analysis. We have looked at how to run and interpret the findings of a one-way and two-way chi-square analysis, as well as how to report the results.